Welcome again to one of my talks. I'm Evil Twin Skippy, and this is a talk on world building and game design. Today, we're going to be using our magic system to develop a character temperament and ability scale. We're going to build on the color wheel of magic that I had developed in my previous talk. What we're going to essentially do is take our 6 colors and add a mixing color in between to make 12, and assign each of them an archetype. And I realize not everybody sees color the same way, so I will try on every one of these diagrams to make sure that we've got a number, and that number is essentially like a compass direction, so you can follow one angle along the circle, 0 to 360, just like following a compass. And this is the list of terms I'm going to use for each of the colors in those bins, and I will, again, try to keep my usage of the name of the color consistent if I reference it. So, why do your characters need personality? Because characters with no personality are boring. And the best characters are the ones that are shaped by their lifestyle and environment. Skills just don't come out of nowhere, and if they do, we have ugly words for that. So it matters because everything that people do requires some sort of self-directed practice, something that they do every day without thinking about it. And personalities that lack the interest in a particular range of actions or practices that are needed to develop a skill just won't develop it. Let's fall back on music. Everybody loves music. On TV tropes, they have this idea that ensembles can be explained as a 5-man band. You have the heart, the brawn, the brains. There's a hero and a foil, but their personality types kind of drift around depending on the type of story it is. But you always have these 3. The heart will express as a greenish shade of color. They always have the job of, they're the ones that keeps the band together. They always know a guy. They're usually the backup vocals or the harmonica. It's like, why are you even in the band? And if there's a psychic in the group, that's her. She has ESP or premonitions or telepathy. The brawn always uses the most direct approach to a problem. Plays the drums, is supernaturally strong or immune to pain or just has a really thick skull. The brains is the out-of-the-box thinker. He's often the wallflower, plays keyboards, is usually a computer hacker. And the reason why each of these characters plays the instrument that they play is shaped by their personality. The brain enjoys self-directed activities, and that's why he learned to play the piano and learned to code. These are things that you have to do off by yourself for hours and hours at a time. If you're not content with that, you just don't follow through. The heart is a social butterfly. She doesn't play an ambitious instrument, but she loves to socialize, and that social dynamic is what she brings to the team. And the brawn, he just loves focus and muscle memory and physical movement. These are the things that make him tick, and drums just bring that out in him. There's a concept in pop culture called the 10,000 hours of practice. It was originally developed by Anders Ericsson. It was made famous in Malcolm Gladwell's book, The Outliers. And unfortunately, it's not really backed up by science, but it feels true. And remember, we are writing fiction. Fiction's job is to be truer than reality. Or so says Sean Salon. Now, a little housekeeping. I am going to be mixing real research and original ideas and stuff that we are just creating a polite fiction about. Whenever I am using something unsourced or made it from whole cloth, I will have the evil twin Skippy icon somewhere on the screen. If I cite Sean Salon, he is a made-up person in my Sublight Story universe. Born in 1942, died in 1951, a contemporary of Mark Twain and George Westinghouse, Nikola Tesla, Albert Einstein, Marie Curie, Carl Jung. He developed the underlying theory of our magical chromodynamics, and he blended Taoism, Hindu cosmology, general relativity, and quantum mechanics to do it. Here we can see him at the 5th Solvay Conference in 1927. But let's get back to reality for a moment and the research of Carl Jung. Now, Carl Jung's important. First, he was, along with Sigmund Freud, one of the founders of modern psychiatry. He lived from 1875 to 1961, and his work inspired Joseph Campbell, who in turn inspired George Lucas. And as we all know, George Lucas got very, very rich and very, very famous and inspired a lot of other people. Now, you'll see in script writing classes and courses and whatnot these Jungian archetypes, and they list out 12 of them. And there's this whole system built around it, and unfortunately not really Jungian archetypes. They're kind of 12 names that Carol Pearson and Margaret Mark picked out of a hat in their book The Hero and the Outlaw, and they've taken on a life of their own. I mean, the names match archetypes that Jung described, but the way they use archetypes is very, very different. For Jung, it's more like a trope that is part of the collective unconscious and people just understand. For them, it's kind of a box that you file people into. It's basically the Zodiac with extra steps. And because this thing has taken on a life of its own, the terms are all over the place. These are just a selection of the different terms for the different archetypes that different authors have used. I mean, if I really wanted a confusing and useless system, I'd have just used Myers-Briggs. Oh wait, they have archetypes too. And yeah, I did try to tie together MTBI with the Jungian archetypes, in air quotes, Jungian archetypes, and I reject your reality and substitute my own. Unless you know the quote better from Dungeon Master. So, back to Carl Jung. Jungian archetypes are innate patterns of thought that each person strives to realize. And in the process of actualizing these patterns, each of our psyches has its own take on it. So these components fit along what Jung calls the spectrum. Now, this was the spectrum before the spectrum was cool. To Jung, the spectrum was like the electromagnetic spectrum. In the middle are the colors that we can see and perceive, between the red and the purple. But below red are the things that we can't see. So to him, this was like all of our unconscious urges. And then above purple were all the thoughts that we can't express, our transcendent thoughts, and our interconnectedness with everything. And he called this the collective unconsciousness. We're going to kind of simplify it down a little bit and just place these different archetypes along a color line. Now, fun fact, magenta and fuchsia aren't on the EM spectrum. We can see them as colors, but they don't really have wavelengths. It's wild. We're going to, like Jung, start at the bottom. And so our lowest level thought are impulses. And then we build up to reflexes. And then social behavior sits on top of reflexes. And perceptive behavior is on top of social behavior. And then we move on to the transcendental stuff. I have arranged the 12 archetypes into 3 groups, roughly by how they operate. So we have the reactive thinkers, These people work mostly with Jung's concept of the personal unconscious. They're geared around sensation and emotion. They think from the gut. Their solutions emphasize obviousness and speed. The conscious mind thinkers are the ego in Jung's work. They work from connections and rationality. They like to deal with intuition, and their solutions emphasize common sense. And the Tao is the collective unconscious in Jung's work. These people work in a world of imagination. Where they get their ideas, nobody knows, and what they come up with is usually out of the box. Now, MTBI was real big on introversion and extroversion, and a lot of pop culture psychology grasped onto it like a lamprey to a shark, but that's not the way it was originally intended. Jung described extroversion and introversion, but they were different modes of operating for each of the parts of the psyche. People could be extroverted and introverted in different ways. So go back to our 6 directions, our 6 approaches, how we can solve problems in our magic color wheel. And we can give each of these an attribute. So while quick is an approach, it uses reflexive thinking. Forceful is an approach that uses direct thinking, etc. Well, we have our rule of opposites from our color wheel, and we can see that each of our lines of thinking has an opposite. And when we plot these lines, we can kind of intuitively work out that each of our extremes is either extroverted or introverted. Altruism, direct and reactive thinking are all extroverted styles of thought. It's motivated from the outside. Identity, introspection, and rational thinking are all introverted. They're stuff we do in our head. When we plot what's introverted and what's extroverted, an interesting thing happens. We actually end up with kind of an introverted and an extroverted side of our color wheel, with yellow being the center of extroversion and blue being the center of introversion. So, back to the zodiac. Now, it's a useful tool, but not for why you think. It is useless as far as figuring out planets and things. I used to work in a planetarium. This is what the constellations actually look like if you plot the range of angles that they are around the ecliptic. Deep down in this corner, we have 3 of the major constellations that are basically in the same part of the sky. Libra, Scorpius, and Ophiuchus. Oh, wait, you've never heard of Ophiuchus? Well, it's the 13th sign of the zodiac. Capricorn, it doesn't exist. It's basically almost this little sliver, and then Aquarius covers the rest. Because the constellations aren't, they're just patterns of stars laid out randomly. So the ancients realized this, actually. So what we think of as the zodiac has very little to do with the actual constellations, and more, they just chopped the sky up into 12 pieces and named each of the parts after one of the constellations that they can see. Oh, right. And we also have to remember that in the ancient world, the year started at the vernal equinox. So with that in mind, here is how our color archetypes matches up with the signs of the zodiac. And honestly, it's kind of satisfying. I mean, Aries being the hedonist direct thinker, it's the stubborn ram, it kind of works. Sagittarius as the mopey rebel, yeah. Leo as the bright and shiny explorer. Again, these, fortunately for us, the the tropes of the zodiac are so wishy-washy that we can kind of make them do anything. And here we're just using color to justify a lot of what is already present in popular culture. And since we're doing that, let's steal the elements from astrology. So astrologers kind of borrowed from Greek alchemists the idea that there's 4 elements: fire, air, earth, and water. And they have these symbols. And you can kind of tell part by where it is in the sky, but also you have to pair it with, well, what kind of sign it is: earth, fire, air, or water. Now, Mark and Pearson actually have something very similar in their system. They just called it ego, freedom, social, and order. And again, every writer who's tried to adapt this into their own work has added a different term to it, so we'll do the same. We're going to call the water sign novelty, the fire sign freedom, the earth sign belonging, and the air sign control. Not because I'm overly creative, it just gives us license to organize it the way that makes sense for our system without having to be a slave to the tropes from actual astrology. Plus, at some point, somebody's got to develop another symbol, because now we've got the up, down, up, down, up, down. I need a left, right, and a B and A, plus the start button. So, novelties is our water sign. They live by sensational experience. They love discovery, and they love asserting that they exist. Freedom are the fire signs from astrology. They live by personal experience. They're the explorers. They want to be themselves. Belonging is the earth sign. They connect with others. They live by exchanging information, and they take their basically they want their place in society. And impact is our air sign. They love to influence others and assemble their own personal truth, and they really want to reshape the world around them. We kind of take our frames, our reactive, conscious, and Tao, and we combine them with our drives, and we get something that is every bit as useless as what the other systems produce, but it's our own. And if you prefer, I also offer it in a hex crawl. So let's get back to Carl Jung for a moment. Just kidding. What we're going to do is pair up colors with emotion, and we're going to use research that was done by Posner, Russell, and Peterson, and their circumplex model of effect. Now, feelings are important because people have feelings and people buy books. There are things that we really can't explain, but we can feel. And our job as storytellers is to make our audience feel what we can't explain, or what we don't want to explain. The work on the circumplex model actually strapped people into a brain scanner, and they were able to tell from which parts of the brain were activated what was a pleasant experience and an unpleasant experience, and what was something that excited someone and something that bored them, basically. So one axis is pleasant and unpleasant, and the other axis is activation and deactivation. Their terms, not mine. But something was interesting is when they were taking these measurements, they also asked the participants what emotion that they were feeling. And essentially you can plot around like a compass what emotions are. Each emotion seems to have its own direction when you apply this math model. And you find that related emotions are just separate each other by distance from the center. So frustrated just seems to be a watered down version of distressed. But when we get over to sad, gloomy, and depressed, well, they're all on the same part of the graph here. How do we tell them apart? And that's where I'll break out the HSV model, that I described in my magic talk. So while here with these numbers, they're kind of the same, what we can say is that there's an extra axis that we can't see because paper is two-dimensional, and there's some difference in those three emotions on this extra axis of ours. Now, how does this pair up with our archetypes? Well, actually pretty well. You look at red, they're a direct thinker. They're immersed in the world around them. Well, alert kind of describes that type of person. If you look at the custodian type, they're our caretaker. Well, they are pretty happy people. Going down to the jester, our comedian. Actually, sad fact, a lot of comedians are actually clinically depressed. And we have the numbers to back it up, people. This is kind of nice. So I'll wrap up because this is getting long here. But we can, using our color model, produce a pretty plausible pop culture archetype system. And we can explain that certain characters have certain magic because that certain magic requires a certain lifestyle that fits that particular character. We're going to use the 12 signs, which is just basically a warmed over horoscope. We can also explain magic as having a core emotion. And that color of a core emotion is something intuitive that even people that aren't good at math can kind of grasp and understand. And we can fall back to the zodiac when we need to, because as well understood as it is, it's not very consistent. Now remember, we are writing fiction. Fiction's job is to be truer than reality. All right, I'm going to be putting a talk together, a little 3-minute for each of the 12 archetypes. And then I'm also going to be doing another long form where I pair up our 12 archetype model with another model of personality that's popular with writers called the Enneagram. Thanks again for sticking with me to the end, and I will catch you in the next video.